The rerun, especially Kano rerun, had been described as one of the most horrific elections ever. Will you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely, and I will also want to add that there were similar situations in Benue. Unfortunately, not enough media coverage, but I must agree with you that what was witnessed in Kano on Saturday is not something that we should ever anticipate should happen on our democratic space again. What we saw was totally against every known tenet of democracy. And it's quite unfortunate that at the time that would have expected an improvement in our electoral process, at a time that would have expected an improvement in the conduct of the political elite, what we had on Saturday during the supplementary election, particularly in Kano State, was a total degeneracy from what we have even thought was the bad situation in the past.
You were an observer. From the observer's perspective, what are the major flashpoints of that?
On Saturday, we deployed about 80 observers across Benue, Bauchi, Kano, and Sokoto states. And of course, as anticipated, we have always known Kano would be a place to watch because of the contest between the incumbent governor and his former political godfather, which of course resulted into the stalemate that necessitated the supplementary election. And I want to say that what we saw during the first election, the March 9 election, of course, there were few cases of violence, even in Kano, because there were no visible situations that warranted even cancellation of election in majority of the polling unit, and also in Benue. But what we witnessed on Saturday was a situation where the election virtually turned into war. From all the units observed by our observers, the real situation became so degenerated in Nasarawa local government, where, of course, majority of the votes were expected, on that day. And, the local government was practically under siege. Under siege because there was no single polling unit that you do not find officially about 20 to 30 polling agents wearing tag for the major political parties, PDP and APC. Added to that were the number of thugs mobilized, well armed, with cordials, with machetes, even some with guns. You understand? Also manning these polling stations, thereby not allowing the ordinary people, the normal registered voters, to access the voting point. And it now got to a stage that these characters became so uncomfortable, even with the media and us as observers. So they have to send observers away. And at the point, they have to chase the media away. And after that, what next? They have to chase the agents of the other political parties away. So it became a field day for the operation of the thugs and the agents of the ruling party in the state, who practically took over the entire process. And it was such a terrible scenario.
But what was the security apparatus, agencies doing while this was ongoing?
I will want us to accept one reality here. We've seen several reports of local observation groups, including our own group. We've seen several reports of international monitors. And we've seen statement by INEC itself clearly indicting the security agents on their role in this election. In a situation where security agents, particularly the police in Kano, stood aloof and watched thug taking over practically not even only the polling stations, communities under the guise of election, and they were helpless and they could not raise a finger, and in some cases giving cover to these characters who were perpetrating violence, who were denying innocent people access to the polling stations, who were chasing media in the full glare of camera away from access, from the polling station. I want to say that the role of the security agencies, particularly the police, is, I cannot say it has not been encouraging. It is damning, it is reactionary, and in actual fact, it is one of the major deficiencies that this election has witnessed.
Let me ask you this, because considering the level of impunity with which this gruesome act was being perpetrated by these hoodlums at the polling stations, and the inability of the security agents themselves to respond adequately, after having spent over 54 billion. I mean, doesn't that raise concern about the security agents?
It raises serious concern. Let me cite another instance. In Benue, thugs numbering over 500 practically lay siege on one of the local government where election was to be held, and policemen became practically helpless. And in another situation, returning officers were taking the result of the election to Makurdi under the full protection of the police. This motorcade was attacked, and this ad hoc staff of INEC were, in fact, the returning officer, Professor Mrs. Comfort, is still in the hospital. In fact, there were rumors that she died, but fortunately she is still alive. You know, she was shot at directly. Who should have been more protected among the team of, and ad hoc staff of INEC who are returning results to the central collation station? The police were practically helpless. And now coming back to what you raised, if we have voted over 54 billion of our commonwealth for the purpose of securing an election, and could we really say as Nigerians that the police and other security agencies, about 60, because there was this inter-agency committee set up by INEC, working months ahead before this election, and we had about 16 security organizations. We have the police, the army, the navy, the air force, civil defense, the NIA, even the road safety, the NDL, the EFCC. About 16 military and paramilitary organizations were involved in this committee. Can we justify it as a country that we have delivered adequate security for this election? Can we say that in a circumstance where we have to count over 100 citizens dead because of election, can we say that security, voting such amount for security is justifiable? No. They have not been able to justify so much amount of money that was voted for their role in this election. And it is not only a danger that we are spending so much money on security, and that it's even a danger to democracy itself. If the electoral empire is now shouting that not only the security are not playing their role, but they are conspiring to frustrate the effort of the commission that we witnessed in so many parts of the country.
That's thoughtful. Let's also get, we had issues with vote buying, so to say. In fact, political pundits and observers have continuously raised issues of this, and the challenge of vote buying. How does it impact the integrity of the process? Because this was also reported. For example, in Sakwata State, it was allegedly reported that the people are being given as much as 10,000, 15,000.
Yes.
I mean, what's your?
It's one of the most dangerous things that has happened to our democracy, and a lot of us are beginning to see beyond the integrity of the election to the danger it poses to our democracy itself. Since 1999, that we returned to this republic, of course, traditionally, the major political parties in Nigeria have always engaged in voters' inducement. After the 1999 election, 2003 witnessed, politicians distributing rice, textile materials, and all sort of gifts, so to put it, to entice the electorate, most times pre-election. And that continued till 2007, 2011. But in 2016, for the first time, we openly began to see from Edo State governorship election, we moved to Ondo, to Ekiti, to Osun. We began to see our politicians shamelessly, without regard for any law and order, began to trade for vote openly. Now, it has gotten to a stage where it is no longer secret, the trading, even though we knew people were made to vote and come and take money. But in this case, people are now made to vote, show their ballot, and take money. Wow. It's a very dangerous thing that is happening to our democracy, because there will be no democracy when you remove elections. And the moment you remove the power to vote away from the people and replace it with the power of cash, then democracy is on its way out. And that is this concern of some of us, that this is not just going to be affecting the integrity of our elections, but it's a danger to democracy itself, because now we are taking the power to elect our representative away from the people, we are giving it to cash. It is not going to be the highest bidder a time will come that politicians will no longer campaign for elections because they know that on the day of elections, it is who has the highest cash that buys the vote. Like we witnessed during the supplementary election in Sokoto, in Bauchi, even in Benue.
That's a, that's a serious concern. Another issue has to do with underage voters. I mean, it was observed that there was high level of underage voting. What was your observation on this?
I would want to say that from reports we gathered from our observers, particularly in Kano State, where it was prevalent in previous elections, there were minimal cases, not reported in most cases, because possibly because of the violent situation, or the atmosphere. That I know even the underage voters will not be courageous enough to approach such a scenario. I think that must have necessitated a situation whereby we did not witness, because no, we not visibly witness, cases of underage voting during the supplementary elections, and compared to what we had recorded in 2015, there was a great reduction in 2019, possibly because INEC did some cleaning, on its voters register before the general election.
Let's also ask you about the smart card readers and the welfare of ad hoc staff. These were also became an issue through the process. I mean, what's your observation on this?
Of course, in the course of the election, we had several interactions with INEC, and I think one of the things we realized is that not only do our electorates need further education, but even people that are being engaged by INEC and other stakeholders in the electoral process need further education. There was a particular scenario where some group of UCOM members refused to work, agitating that there were some unpaid allowances. But we conducted our independent investigation, and we realized that INEC had actually paid all its ad hoc staff through their various bank accounts. But what were these young people fighting for? Politicians, in their natural way, had lobbied the electoral officers of this polling unit or these registration areas and has given them money. So that came to the knowledge of some of these, UCOM members and were insisting that they must have their court, which is already a dent on the integrity of the election itself. If you have to obtain or accept money from politicians, irrespective of their party, it tells on how neutral you want to become as an electoral umpire at that level.
So politicians themselves are the ones now.
Yes, politicians are reducing the
ad hoc staff.
And ad hoc staff. So that was what we later discovered were responsible for those protests that we recorded in some of those places, that these young lads wanted their cut of what their senior officers have been given. I said, no, we are not going to work until we are paid. So and INEC swiftly moved in, and I know that if we are going to look at this election as a whole, beyond the role played by some of these characters within the security agencies, we must also look at the role played by some of these ad hoc staff, engaged by INEC.
Nigerians are immensely worried about the quality of the elections. In fact, we've observed renewed thuggery and brigadage being visited on both the electorates and the polity by the political class. And what dangers lie ahead if these shameful acts continue unabated?
Even for those who think they are the beneficiaries of this act, I want to assure them that they will surely become the victims. Now, if you look at the political conversations, they are gradually taking it away from the intellectuals and are beginning to give it to the political thugs. And that's why it's so shameful enough that you could find even governors standing on rostrums for political campaigns, and you find thugs surrounding them. We have witnesses in so many states, even in Lagos, where thugs had to clash during one of the governorship candidate political campaign on a platform occupied by incumbent governor and candidates of their party. It tells you the danger, that it is not just a danger that's going to be imposed on the ordinary people or the ordinary electorate. Even the sponsors of violence will definitely become victims one day. So it is always good that we look at the consequences of our action. How do we encourage a situation whereby you do not allow the ordinary people again, who are harmless citizens, to decide your fate, and you want to give the power to the thugs? It will come to a stage that the thugs will want the power from you. But I think it's a failure of our system, it's a failure of our government, and they must accept the fact that if our security cannot control the atmosphere in our elections again, if security upon all we spend, not only on our security during elections, even our annual budget, our defense take a lot of money. If this cannot guarantee, basic protection for our people during civil exercises like elections, then we must see ourselves as a failure as a nation. And government must begin to review itself. What role and what, because we must look at issues beyond politics. If you give political considerations to so many of these things, you allow thugs to reign, you allow police to support some of these atrocities. But when eventually you get the power and it's time to govern, how do you now restore normalcy? How do you now tell those thugs again that they don't have power? So it is going to come back to the political class, and this is what I think they must begin to realize. That it's not only a danger to us as ordinary citizens, it constitutes greater danger to them. Because when these characters have tested the influence given to them, the cover given to them by the state, by the politicians, then they begin to feel so empowered, and they begin to challenge the authorities of the state.
Finally, comment. What kind of electoral accountability framework does Nigeria need at this point in time?
The first thing I think we must begin to look at in the immediate is how to advance our electoral system. In this country, between 1999 and 2011, we had a country where elections were done on manual register, where people can easily change their picture in print, where Mike Tyson voted in this country, Cecilia Ibu voted in Ondo State, and all sort of manipulation. But it got to a state that we made some progress by introducing the electronic registration system that has given us this card reader. And whether we like it or not, the gains of the card reader in 2015 and 2019 are there to see. So I think we need to start elevating the conversation above electronic accreditation of voters to electronic voting itself. This is going to take a lot of thugs away from work during our elections. It's going to be a major way of tackling this menace of vote buying that is becoming the order of the day in our elections. I think it's going to also increase the credibility of our elections, because our votes cannot begin to count. We may not really get there at once, but I think we must begin to take steps now. There may be a test run using the major cities or using fewer or smaller elections, but I think INEC must begin to look at getting more sophisticated in their approach to elections. And I think the National Assembly, which is the lawmaking body, which has a lot of role to play in determining how our elections are conducted, must begin to look at how we can immediately repeal a lot of retroactive content of our electoral laws. Our electoral laws are still very backward. Our electoral laws are still not much what this country desire. So I think the National Assembly must begin to, then we must look at an all-inclusive stakeholder that must fundamentally involve the media, the electoral empire itself, the security agencies and the civil society, and the politicians, that's the political parties. We must sit down together and tell ourselves the bitter truth, if really we want this democracy to survive. But if it's all about politics, there will be no democracy, and there will be no position for them to contest. The other Nigerians in their way like saying, God forbid. But that is what may likely happen if we don't guard this democracy jealously.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawson, for your insightful analysis.
It's my pleasure.